So welcome back. I'm really excited to talk to you today about what we've been doing at Zentyal to make from OpenChange that was for the small business market to scale to the hosting provider level, and all the work that we've been putting with the team right here in the product in trying to move the architecture from a single tenant or non-decomposable architecture into something that can spread among different nodes. So originally, Zentyal was doing a small business server, an all-in-one, and we pivoted last year, focusing really on the email part, on the groupware, Active Directory, and Exchange. And well, this is the result of a lot of work for all the teams. So I'm really, really happy to have the opportunity to present it. So what is OpenChange? Even if you probably already know what it is, still, I think it's good just to remind what is OpenChange. We are doing one thing, and one single thing. We implement the Microsoft Exchange protocols. Now, it means that we are compatible natively with every Outlook version, that we are not using any plugins, and that actually it simply works. A word about the plugin. During this presentation, I'm going to apply a very simple principle, which is called the no bullshit policy, which means that basically everything that I'm going to tell you is just the truth or my opinion, and anything that I don't know, well, I don't know. But all of the other stuff, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think. So let's talk about the plugins. For me, the plugins is one of the major failures in the software industry, in the groupware industry for the past 15 years. Now, I do understand why people in the first place implemented the plugins. Yeah, the protocol is not open, we don't know how it works, or we do have MAPI expert that may be able to build a solution on top of it. But come on, guys, in 2008, the protocols got opened, we already had OpenChange. Yeah, it was pretty rough edges, not working as it should. But please, why didn't you just like inject a bit of R&D, a bit of effort into that, just that we can bridge the gap and get one single solution that just works, and just get rid of it. Come on, the plugins, scalable? No. So, what do we provide? The landscape of OpenChange is actually a complete full landscape that goes from the client side to the server side up to tools and proxy. So from the client side, the client libraries, we do provide MAPI library that lets you build applications that can communicate with any Exchange server or compatible Exchange server. So that was initially one of the work that we have pushed into GNOME Evolution. So GNOME Evolution MAPI is actually using the OpenChange libraries. The next move to EWS for some other reason, but we did have that. More recently, one of our engineers has pushed some code into Samba to enable the NCAC and HTTP, so RPC over HTTP, so that we can get the stack for the client libraries. It's still in process to get merged it into OpenChange. There were just like some, weird developer stuff going on, just like it's not compatible and stuff like that, but it's on the way. The interoperable server is obviously what we are going to talk about right here about the architecture. And about the tools and proxy, originally we had a proxy, and we still do have it, that we have been using, and that was used in one acceleration appliances. So people were using it, and that was helping. We had a module stack, and people could just like modify on-the-fly traffic between Outlook and Exchange. And we do have tools like common client tools that let you connect to an Exchange server, do some basic operations, and even some that let you create Exchange user directly from your Linux desktop. So just like command line tool, very straightforward. But about the interoperable server, let's just talk about the positioning. The positioning is very easy with just a bridge between Microsoft Outlook and Open Standards. Now we could even replace Open Standards with proprietary solution at some point, but really what we want is to be a bridge between one word and the rest of the word. Now what it means is that we are not a groupware solution. It has never been the intention, and it has never been the objective. We do fundamentally believe that it's pointless to try to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we are not email. I mean, we do not do email servers. I mean, there are already email servers out there that are working in production, that scale, that work pretty fine. There are relational databases. All of this is working pretty fine. So we just try to find, as much as we can, the best software solution for one given problem without falling in the opposite, which is too many solutions just to solve one single problem. And we try as much as possible to collaborate with other groupware vendors so that we can really build a powerful solution. So about the ecosystem, originally, historically, OpenChange is based on Sogo. So it came out of one trip that I had several years ago. I had my best friend living in Montreal. I went there, and there was this company we have discussed over IRC, and I spent 1 week there, just like to discuss with them how we could just like bootstrap the relationship. And a couple of years later, we had the first version of the plugin. And since 2013, 2014 actually, we have really taken it as part of inside Zentyal, and we are just like contributing very actively on it. So mainly we are the main maintainer of this Sogo OpenChange plugin. And in the ecosystem that is growing, we also have other groupware vendors. One is Bluemine. Well, the demo didn't work, but tomorrow, for sure, we are going to have a rocking fuel demo that is just like going to go out of the sky. And we also have Collab, with who we are collaborating. So it's a growing ecosystem. The thing is that we just don't want to impose something to someone. We just want to provide the tool so that you can use the best solution that match your needs behind it. OpenChange and its identity card. So this is a very nice graphic that has been done by one of our designers based on MAPIHTTP analytics data that they have collected. So OpenChange is a free software solution. It's released under the term of a GPLD free. We are a member of the Conservancy of the Software Freedom Conservancy, so we are under the umbrella of this Software Freedom Conservancy, similarly to Samba. We do have a code base which is actually more than 250,000 lines of code, and it's increasing every year. We have 7 active contributor developer, most of them actually being Zentyal employees. And the thing is that during the last year, we had an increased number of features of bug fixing of code. I think we have added 100,000 line of codes to the code base, and we have at the same time removed 50,000. So just like an increase of 50,000 line of code, which is huge for a project of this size. And we have the number of commits that just like go to the roof, and the number of pull requests on in every direction. So that's really cool. The website, www.openchange.org, and obviously all the code is available from GitHub. So put a star, fork the code, just show us that you are interested into that. That will be just awesome. A bit of the history of OpenChange, so that you understand where we come from and where we are heading to. Initially, from the period from 2003 to 2008, we've been doing protocol analysis. So you heard Volker yesterday talking about the French cafe technique, so that we can just like use the error of the server just like to try to define how it works. And at the same time, one of the techniques that we've developed in OpenChange was the French waiter technique, which is the opposite. We try to put some errors, or just like sell the coffee of the client to see how grumpy is going to be, so that we can find the error that the client is going to provide. So combining the error from the client and the error from the server, then we had just like this huge knowledge that we could back to understand how things work. So this has been what we've been doing for 5 years, just like network captures, Wireshark, lot of coffee, lot of coffee, lot of coffee. And after a moment, in 2008, protocols released. And then our behavior, the way that we were working, has completely changed. It was not only about network analysis, but was all being a protocols implementing specifications. So this has really changed. It doesn't mean that we are still doing protocol analysis, because there are still things that are unclear in the specifications, or things for which we need to do investigations. But mainly now we have this huge amount of documentation that we can work on to improve how complete is OpenChange. And finally, since 2013, when I joined Zentyal, then we have started to shift, and from an open source project, try to build a product on top of it. So try to clean the edges, so that it's not as rough, that it's been more polished, that we have a graphical interface that actually it's easy for the user to install. OpenChange until Zentyal was really complicated to deploy. I mean, that has been one of the major blockers for adoption, besides all of the features that we have been adding, but this has really been a blocker. And so right now, we do have a product. And this product is, the underlying link of this product is the Samba project. We've been using Samba all along the way, from the very beginning. We were using Samba to write the client libraries. we are using Samba as the infrastructure for the server. Actually, OpenChange is a plugin to Samba. So it's just like a server that you fire up that runs into Samba, and you have Samba as an active directory, and we have the service, OpenChange service that runs on top of it. So we leverage the MSRPC infrastructure server that Samba provide, and obviously we'll also leverage the active directory. So the OpenChange compatibility landscape. That is a question we have often, is what do you support and what don't you support? So let me be very clear about that. We have a product that is ready for production, that is actually compatible with every Outlook version from 2003 to 2013. Now we have just deprecated 2003 because not many customers that are using that any longer, and focus on more recent version, mainly also because we had work in the pipe that made it much more interesting to focus on recent version. And we have in the family of protocols that we support, we have what we would call the on-premises exchange protocols. So these are the RPC protocols. It means EMSMDB for the mailbox, NSPI for the address book, RFR to do some lookup. We also have the hosted exchange with the RPC over HTTP and HTTPS with Outlook Anywhere that we do implement. And we do have a set of core EWS services. So the services that we implement are auto discovery, out of office, the availability service, and what is the other one? And we have stubs for the offline address book so that Outlook just doesn't complain when it's synchronized and say, hey, there's something that is going wrong. So this is what we have right now, and this is enough to just like enter the market and make a difference. Now the thing that is pending, something that we are going to work on, is obviously the MAPIHTTP that is available within Microsoft Outlook 2016. So we do have the intention to walk through the specification during this quarter and probably make significant progress in Redmond next month and try to get as much as we can a working implementation in the Q4 2015 so that we can complete our availability from Outlook 2007, 2010, 2013, 2016 and be actually, when it's released and it's not beta any longer, have something that just work out of the box. Now, things that are not working. There are two things that we are not interested into. The first one is Outlook for Mac, and the second thing is ActiveSync. So Outlook for Mac would require us a significant amount of effort trying to implement the EWS protocol. And another thing, just to be clear, Microsoft Outlook for Mac just represents less than 1% of the global email market share of Microsoft. So basically, I mean, we are a very small team. We need to choose our battles. I mean, and be friendly in the friendly way. But we can't put our energy in every direction at the same point. So Outlook for Mac is really not a focus for us. And on the other side of the picture, ActiveSync within the OpenChange project, right? We are not interested because there are many solutions out there where you have zpush, you have Sogo ActiveSync, you have Synchrotron, you have probably others out there. And to be honest, if we want to implement something, I want us to be the best. I just don't want to be average or to be under average or to be competing. I mean, we have our uniqueness and we need to narrow our focus. It's just a matter of focusing and getting things done and getting things done right. And the place where we can significantly make a difference today, these are the Microsoft Exchange Protocol, RPC over HTTP, and MAPIHTTP, because there is nobody else except Microsoft that can work on this implementation or have a working implementation right now and is open source. So, with this protocol that we have, we can empower two critical business cases. One is on-premises and the other one is hosted exchange. Now, what is the difference between them? Fundamentally, they are using the exact same services. The main difference is that on one hand, we have a single non-decomposable that will just work into a single tenant instance of the server that we deliver, and that is Zentyal server. You go to zentyal.org, you can download the community edition, development edition. You go to zentyal.com, you can have your commercial edition that is supported. On the other side of the picture, we wanted to develop a version that was multi-tenant, that was decomposable, that we could scale horizontally and vertically at different level. And this is the solution that we are going to get into right now. The sort of services that we are using for this hosted exchange and also for the on-premises version, We're using Sumber4. Sumber4 is just like our container that transport the OpenChange, where we do have access to Active Directory, to the endpoint mapper, so we have access to all of the infrastructure. This is where OpenChange lives. We have a proxy and a WSGI application that let us do the RPC over HTTP stuff. We have MySQL that is going to be used for the storage of the calendar, contact, tasks, and also for metadata information that OpenChange is using internally. We have the messaging server, devcode, postfix. We have memcached, but actually we are probably overusing at the moment, but we are overusing for some reason. That we are using to cache information, to do hot copy of some information that are persistent, and that we're also using for notifications, and we go through that in a moment. And finally, we have Sogo, the Sogo server that is providing the connector that we're using inside OpenChange, and is also providing the webmail and the ActiveSync. The main concept behind this hosted exchange version, hosted OpenChange version, is that we want to separate the processing from the user information from the data storage. And it's a core concept. We need to separate the three of them because each of these elements has different requirements in terms of scalability and in terms of how we can make the solution grow properly. So besides the security aspect, which is that if one of the nodes is compromised, then you need to get access to the other node and you don't get access to everything. There are the scalability consideration that we have in the pipe. So this is what the architecture looks like. So it's a lot of boxes. And in this hosted architecture, we have one point which we call the trusted zone. And this trusted zone is actually a set of services that are not exposed to the internet. The mail server would actually be half within the zone, half outside the zone. But yeah, you know, for the beauty of the graphics, I decided just to let in inside the trusted zone. And within this zone, we have Sumber4 that we are going to use for authentication. We have Memcache that we are going to use for all of our temporary storage. We have the MySQL cluster for data storage, the mail server that we are also using for storage, and we have the OpenChange nodes. And these OpenChange nodes have something very specific. OpenChange is a plugin, so it works within Sumber4. And Sumber4 is an Active Directory server that is binding on different ports. I mean, we have the endpoint mapper, and we run as a service on a port. So it means that every time that we want to run an OpenChange server, then we need to find a way so that it becomes a dummy Active Directory server. If we want to separate the user information from the node, then we need to make sure that the OpenChange node is only doing processing, MAPI processing, transmit the information, just like do all of the magic and pass it to the backend, and doesn't have to store that. Because let's say that we have a huge peak, a huge load. What happens is that we need to fire up a new OpenChange node, and what happens? If all of the user information are processed, then it means that we need to run a machine, then join it as an additional domain controller. That is not a sustainable situation. So we have started to build a stack where actually we're using OpenChange as a dummy, I mean with fake information, and all of the information that really matters from the Active Directory are actually in another part of the architecture. And this OpenChange node has one consideration, is that originally, that's a synchronous node. It means that whenever Outlook is asking something, then we respond, but we can't respond on our own. And at the same time, with the very recent version of Outlook, you have this asynchronous word where we can actually impact and just tell Outlook there's something that you need to proceed. So authentication, how do we handle that? And that's going to be pretty easy. I have my Outlook, which is over the internet, and it first goes to the proxy where we have a load balancer, and that it ends up in one of the nodes. After it gets from one of the nodes, it's going to hit the OpenChange node. And the OpenChange node is actually just going to get the information and try to authenticate it against a Sumber4 Active Directory, check if the user is there and connected, and after that, end of story, we have a connection that is created between the Outlook client and the OpenChange node, and that goes directly through the app proxy. So we have actually two connections, right? One connection between app proxy and the OpenChange node, and the other connection between the Outlook client and the app proxy. Now about the data, because from here we need to get access to our data. So same thing with my connection. To get access to my data, I need some kind of black magic. And this black magic is what we call MAPI store. It's actually where everything happens. This is where, after doing all the processing from the trying to make the information relevant, we are going to pass it to another layer so that we can get this information back, or we can push this information. And this is where we have backends. So this is where we have the Sogo backends, and this is where we also have the REST API that we are going to talk in a moment. And using this node, this MAPI store information, I can either have access to my mail server, and then I get access to my IMAP storage where I can fetch my email and everything, or I can have access to my MySQL cluster, and I can just like get access to all of my calendar, contact, and task. Now, for my MAPI store layer to know where my information is stored, I need another stuff, which is indexing. I need to have a way to say, to map the information and say, this number is what makes sense in the Exchange world, and this information is what makes sense into OpenChange. And this indexing is actually happening here with Memcache and MySQL cluster. So we have a table in MySQL that just like index everything. Every single message that you have in your system has a mapping between one number that we generate, which is an ID, an Exchange ID, and makes sense for Outlook, and a URL that we use internally, and that is going to do the mapping. And, well, no bullshit policy. I have to tell you something about this MySQL cluster and why we are using Memcache here and why we get through it. Historically, when we started to work on OpenChange, we were working in online mode. And in online mode, you are fetching your information one after the other. So if I have 10,000 messages, I can get them sequentially. And at some point, well, we moved to something where we implemented the cache mode. And in cache mode, you need to batch all the things that you're retrieving. So at some point, we ended up working with business mailboxes that were 8, 10, 15 gigabytes of information, and we need to process and retrieve messages one after the other. Well, let me tell you that if you try to retrieve 18 or 20 or 40,000 emails one after the other, it's just a nightmare. It just doesn't scale. And it doesn't scale because every time we were getting to the MySQL just to do the indexing, it's not really fetching the information, but when we get to MySQL just to retrieve and know what was the URL where the information was stored, it was taking us 30 milliseconds. So 30 milliseconds multiplied by 40,000 messages when you do your first synchronization, well, I can tell you it makes quite a lot of time, and from the user perspective, that is not something sustainable. So one of the workaround, because we can't just change the API right now. I mean, we still do one message at a time. But one way to do that is because the moment where we consume time is with this SQL indexing and accessing. This is where we have put Memcache. So Memcache works as a hot copy. It takes all of the information, and then when we access Memcache just to get the information, it's much quicker. And from 30 milliseconds, we ended up into less than 1 or 2 milliseconds. Which means that in the end, our first synchronization, the moment when you open Outlook and you get your first message in your mailbox, before it was something like 15 or 20 minutes. After that, it was just less than a minute. So, and also because we are fetching information by batch, so even the user perspective that the message starts to arrive in the mailbox and we continue processing, and the user experience is great, and the user actually can start to work immediately. MAPI store. We've talked about this little magic layer. This MAPI store concept is actually a universal translator of the Microsoft Exchange protocols. It's not a matter of how much information we are going to process out there. The point is that inside OpenChange, we are doing all of this magic by processing the information. And finally, when we go to MAPI store, we have a set of CRUD operation, very easy operation. We have something like 15 or 15 operation, more or less. And that are pretty straightforward, just like open folder, create message, open message, this kind of operation, a bit like in the REST API. And the beauty of MAPI store is that actually it's a transparent and unified access to any kind of storage behind. So we have IMAP, we have MySQL. I could very likely have Twitter or my Google Calendar, or have or replace MySQL with an Oracle database if I need to scale and MySQL doesn't provide enough is not good enough. So I can do all of this kind of thing. And the other thing is that every root folder in my mailbox, if I open my mailbox and I have inbox calendar, every single of this root folder can be stored into another backend. So I can have, this is the unified mailbox really, I can have access to 20, 30 kind of different backends, and all the vision is just unified from my Outlook user perspective and experience. And I have access to all of this information directly. So it's a very, very powerful concept. But here's the thing, is that we learn from our mistake. And we have something that I call the 0 to 1 paradigm. So that comes from the Peter Thiel book, 0 to 1, on how you build a startup, and actually the moment where you start to gain traction and it gets over you. Well, if we apply that to programming, it basically means that 0 is when you don't have anybody that really contributes, and 1 is when you have people that starts to contribute. Well, from my experience, nobody has really contributed to the writing OpenChange backend. This has been my major failure during several years. I was so convinced that a clean C API would make things work, but I was wrong for 2 reasons. The first one is that the amount of knowledge, the requirement, the learning skill, the learning curve that you needed to go through in order to be able to start writing an OpenChange backend was really too complicated. Also, the language was a blocker. I mean, it's much easier today to find a Python developer than finding a C, C++, or an Objective-C developer. I mean, we C developers, we are just like dinosaurs. I mean, you see a young rookie that get out of engineering school, they tell you about JavaScript and this kind, and they are rock star in JavaScript, but you say, okay, but you know that you can write binding in C for JavaScript. Oh, no, JavaScript. Anyway, we are dinosaurs, but I do accept it, and that's fine. And well, that's basically it. It really took too long. By the moment you started to development and the moment that you were able to have the first visible results, it took several weeks. So very complicated for a developer. So we're just trying to reverse the logic and say, okay, how can we improve that? And the first thing is say, okay, today, okay, not really JavaScript. JavaScript is really too extreme for me. I'm going to go for Python. And we have started to work on the Python C MAPI store gateway, where the objective was we still have this API, and this API works fine, but actually instead of developing a very complex backend, it's just going to be a Python script. So you can just test it, and you can do that with try and failure, and it works really fine. And one way to even ease that is rather than using complex structure, just use the basic atomic type of Python. So dictionary, tuples, list, and that is all. So we've been using the Python C API, and it really helped improve the development, which means that with that, we have been able, once it was developed, to write a backend for a for a groupware vendor in less than 2 days. You know, just like a proof of concept, very quick proof of concept to show that, to demonstrate that we could get some information out of it. But still, that was not enough. Because basically with this Python C MAPI store, we are still introducing a barrier, an entrance barrier. What if my developers that I want to engage with are not using Python? Let's say that they are using JavaScript. Well, one way to do that has been to implement a REST API. And actually this REST API let us build language agnostic backends. And we are basically doing dogfooding with that. So the REST API is implemented within our REST API stuff, and so that we deliver a REST API to all other people. And that is actually what Bluemind is using for the development, and that is what we are going to, what we are working also on with Collab on that. So it really helps speeding up the development because it gives us this ability to go very straightforward and have something and also the development, we have all of this development infrastructure that you can go with very quickly that is based on Docker, so you just fire 2 or 3 containers and then you have a working system. How it works? Well, we try to simplify as much as possible, and it's only a matter of getting or setting properties. So we have a set of HTTP commands and we have a JSON payload. And to give you an example, every Exchange resource on the system is actually a resource, a REST resource. So we have folders, we have mails, we have calendars, contacts, attachments. And one of the examples is if I want to retrieve my folder number 2, then it's just like a localhost 5001 folder 2. So it's pretty much straightforward. And you have the reference with the documentation if you want to have a look at all of the different commands. But let's just have a look at the JSON payload because that is the part that is really interesting. in order to even lower the entrance barrier, we are leveraging the MSOX props documentation, and every single property that you have in this specification, you can use it here using the canonical name. So you can use the canonical name, and if you are using custom properties or properties that are not documented, you can just use the 0x and the hexadecimal version. And then you just put afterwards the value. So we support the float, we support also binary version by doing base64 encoding. We support basically we support all of the properties. And in addition to this set of properties, so we are talking about thousands of properties that let you actually build your application. We also have just a set of custom properties that we are using to actually create the hierarchy. Because every single object in our system has a unique URI, we need also a way to identify and then just like index them properly. Which means that I can very easily just like change a folder or move a message without just like still getting my URLs unique. And about the operations, we have a set of operations that is pretty easy. We're just using 5 HTTP commands. We're using the head to check if the resource exists or actually to get the number of items. We're using the get to return an item or get with messages or folders to return the list of items in a folder. We do have the post if we want to create a resource. We have the put if we want to update a resource, and the delete if we want to delete a resource. And that is all. I mean, that's it. And it works. Right? So let's move to the asynchronous notification challenge. And it has really been a challenge, because that was one of the things that was really a blocker for OpenChange adoption. The idea is to bring real time to OpenChange. We've been using hacks for years and years. Basically, one of the hacks that we were using in the past was to say, okay, I know that my Outlook has a needle loop, so that to maintain the connection open, he needs to send a needle, just like a request to maintain the connection open, otherwise it closes. We are going to leverage that to just inject notifications back so that the clients get the notification and then updates his mailbox automatically. It worked until some point, and then it stopped to work miserably. And when we were working in cache mode, actually that was working for online mode, but for cache mode, we couldn't predict when the client was going to fetch the information. So you could receive an email and wait for 1 hour, 2 hours, maybe 3, and you wouldn't receive anything. So we've tried to work this around, and our main problematic was that Summer 4, the way that we have implemented OpenChange is Summer 4, that was synchronous. So we are always dependent on Outlook to ask us information. We can't just send information back. And in the way that Exchange implements asynchronous notification, he has an endpoint where we have push notifications, and it just like open a request there and say, okay, you have 5 minutes to send me a reply. And I'm just going to wait, so I'm just waiting for the reply. And they are using just like a shared global handles between the endpoints. So that was also something that was complicated. So we've been trying to think, how can we implement that in a way that it can work with 100,000 clients at the same time, or let's say 100,000 connections, and actually doesn't create network congestion or create a high peak of information. The first thing is that the broker architecture was a no-go. A broker in the middle is just like my single point of failure. My broker goes down, everything goes down. And it means that I would have to get sure that my broker can scale so that I can handle more and more connection or more and more data. So we've tried to be looking at another approach, which is brokerless, and actually doesn't actually use peer-to-peer connections between the remote backends that are sending notifications and the OpenChange server that is handling that. And we're using Memcache for 2 purposes. The first one, which is a directory services, and the second thing, which is using Memcache as a message queue. So how does it work? And now we are going to get through exactly the way OpenChange is working. And after that, I'm going to make you a demo to see, from the user perspective, what is the result. So my client is going to connect to an OpenChange node and say, okay, I would like you to send me notification wherever you have something new to tell me. That's what it does. OpenChange say, okay, no problem. I'm going to fire up a server on a random port that is just going to be associated to this DCRPC session. So it's just something for you. Nobody else is ever going to send a notification there. So we just fire a server on a random port. Then we need to say to external services that for this username, for this session, there is a server that is available at this address on this random port. So we just register all of this information into memcached. So we just have just like a key store value, and we store this information. Once we have done that, let's assume that I receive a new email in my mail server. So receiving my email, I have a plugin in DevCode that is going just like to intercept the transmission, the delivery on LDA is going to intercept the thing between postfix and DevCode, and is going just like to get the information and say, okay, I would like to know if this user is registered on the system. If yes, can you send me all the addresses, all of the sequences where I can notify the user? Which means that if I have 5 users that are using the same account, this 5 users will also receive the notification. That's the point. Then once it receives the information, it will directly go to the server that we have fired, and send its notification. And this notification blob is very, very small. It's just like 20 bytes, 25 bytes. So it's very, very small. But if you multiply it by 100,000, and if everything happens in a second, then it starts to make a high load. So it just sends this notification, and then the client is going to take the information, process it internally, and once it has finished, it's just going to return the bug? No bug. It's processed the information, and it's going to create a payload that it's sent into a message queue. So it's just a way for us to communicate with the other endpoints. Rather than using Unix domain socket, the reason why we are not using Unix domain socket is because I'm not sure that my asynchronous server is going to be on the same node that the synchronous one. I don't know, and I don't want to know. I just want to get sure that all of my nodes can communicate properly. So once I have stored that everything in my message queue, I'm going to return back to send the notification, and just say, okay, now you can just like connect and get the information. So the client next connect back to the OpenChange node on the other endpoint, and we are going to check into memcache where the information is stored. And we finally send the info. We are finally retrieving the information from the mail server, and that is it. So instead of talking to the next step, because I only have 5 minutes left, I would like to make you a demo to actually show you what is the outcomes of it. So I do have here an Outlook 2013, and behind I have a Zentyal 4.1 server. So it's not the decomposable architecture, because well, actually that was, well, you know, too much. It was easier to just fire up one virtual machine in my environment, but it's basically the same. So with my Outlook 2013 live demo, okay. So one of the things that we can see, it's just like a quick hack, an Easter egg. But you see that we are connected to protocols Plugfest Europe 2015. So directly from the configuration file in Samba, I can just like edit. Edit what is going to be the name. So just like something fun if you want to customize a little more what OpenChange has to offer. So here I have my Outlook 2013. I'm connected. I'm just going to send a new email to myself. So I'm just saying to email demo protocols Plugfest. What is the time? 39. Yeah. And I just send it. Now my message is sent. It's probably going to require 3 or 4 seconds, and then automatically my message appears and I have my notification showing up. If I was firing at the same time an Outlook 2010, an Outlook 2013, an Outlook 2007 connected with the same user, all of them would receive and have all of the notification and be updated automatically. So it's a very, very, very powerful stuff here. And so at the moment we only implement the new mail notification. The idea, the next step is to move this forward and actually also implement how we can update the event, create the event. So for example, in my browser, if I'm here, I'm just going to send an email, same thing to Julien. So I have received my email here. So I'm doing another one to Julien. Demo from the webmail. Bazinga. Send it. Going to my Outlook. And automatically I receive also it from the Outlook. So that is what we are working on at the moment. So this part is implemented, it's in master, it's going to be released. Actually yesterday, Samba 4.1.18, the version on which was based with all of the patches required for us to fire up the notification server is in. So we are ready for, I think, almost a year to release a new version of OpenChange. And we are even in the process of getting things done so that we can get 4.2, a version that is based on 4.2. So the next steps is all of this REST API, it's currently in a branch. We want to merge that everything into master after the release so that all of the groupware vendor that we're working with, where we can have the same relationship and move forward and test it and make more incremental release. Just like a release, we are almost ready to fire the first release with the REST API. It wouldn't be the best. There's a lot of work to do. We still don't have notification. We still don't have authentication, and we don't have the cache mode. But things can go, you know, one after the other. And if you want to make a preview, that are the kind of things we can do. Just two things before we leave. Just to show you the potential of what we have on the calendar, I have actually put all of the events for the first day. I didn't put the others. It means that we can put, we are at the level where we put all the information. We can really have complex calendaring. I have all of my information also showing up directly from the calendar on the webmail, and from the contact perspective, which is interesting. So in the contacts, I have actually put I think almost all the speakers, and if I go, for example, with Michael, are you there? You're not there. I knew it. And then I can, you know, have all the notes, and I could even create very quickly a new contact just to show you that it works. Let's calling Bazinga Baboom. That works for John Ltd. I'm going to put a picture. Oops. And my picture is in the box. SRV demo. Okay, demo F. Yes. Because of that. Up. Come on. If not, wow, that will be okay. Demo. Tomorrow you are going to get a demo from Matteo. Well, okay, I've put a picture of my daughter that has the head into the what we call barba papa, algodon, I think in Spanish. So anyway, saving my contact, so I have my information here. I'm doing just like an update, a send and receive to update the information. Now I go to my contact, to my address book, and I find my Bazinga with my little daughter that loves algodon so much. And that is what we have right now, so if you do have questions, I would love to hear about it. No question?
Yep.
First of all, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much. It's really positive. Made me feel good about the future. When you say we have this now, when do we have it?
Now.
Now? In production?
In production.
So if it's automatically updated, that should be available in our production sites now?
Yep.
Okay. I will see you this evening. Thanks.
But our objective is actually now to grow the user base, and the team is working really hard on deployments. We have several deployments going on, and I mean this is the next step. The next step is Bazinga. No other question?
I have a question.
Oh yes.
So you have shown from the beginning. You show the history of OpenChange. What were the different stages that the project has been through? In 5 years' time, how do you see the project? What will be the stage you think it will be in at that moment?
I don't know. I'm not wizard. I just live the present moment.
Carpe diem.
Exactly. I mean, no bullshit. I mean, we are doing great work. We are going to continue. I don't know what tomorrow is going to be made of. but I'm very positive and confident about what is going to happen. Yep.
It's really impressive that you're making a business around what's a free software product, because that happens all too rarely. But is this a self-defeating business? Because is it the case that the best case scenario is that people use OpenChange to move away from Exchange and then move towards more standard services like Pure Collab or something else, in which case, isn't it a slightly self-defeating business?
I don't know. Let's just say that we have one statement, and that is a fact. The fact is that we have 1 billion users that are using Outlook around the world, okay? And this 1 billion user, if we can provide an alternative for some of them that don't want to move with Office 365 to the cloud, then we have an alternative without changing. And that is also something that is potentially very interesting for Microsoft, because, well, why the user wants to, they can just wait for the user to be ready to move. It's really, the thing is that it's not how they are going to move, it's when they are going to move to the cloud. I do strongly believe that they are going to move to the cloud. So we are offering, potentially from Microsoft perspective, maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that we are offering this nice temporary solution, which is an interoperable pipe where people can just wait a little. And obviously from the open source perspective, the challenge is to get more customers and potentially not just to be a one-on-one compatible, but actually provide much more value, different kind of value that is maybe not in the business, that are not of interest to Microsoft in the short term. So
let me add something to that answer. We don't position ourselves, from the market point of view, we don't position ourselves as a replacement for Exchange. We're targeting a different market, specifically those users who are not using Exchange but are using Outlook. They use IMAP protocols. We believe that the MAPI protocols are actually superior in terms of collaboration and functionality. So we're not trying to just be a copycat of Exchange, but to actually deliver better value for those users who are not using Exchange protocols but do have the power of Outlook.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, first of all, you have said that you added memcached when when you realized that querying MySQL was a bit slow.
Yeah.
Do you have perhaps numbers how much traffic were you receiving in terms of messages, queries per second, stuff like that?
Well, the main blocker here is the first synchronization in cache mode, because the first synchronization is when the user is going to get all of his mailbox the first time, and then is only going to contact the Exchange server for the updated item. So the traffic in this case is relatively slow. Now for this first synchronization, you have 20,000 emails, then that requires a huge amount of time. Now, the memcache obviously is a trick, a short-term trick, maybe a mid-term trick, for two reasons. The first one is potentially we are not doing the indexes in the MySQL database properly, and we may have some just like by changing from string to int, we may gain significant performances. That's potentially one aspect. But the second one is, in any case, that lives in the roots of OpenChange, because we have taken this decision very in the past that we would get one item at the time. It's a no-go when you go to a production with a business-sized mailbox. So this is why we have put memcache in the middle. And the only number that I can give you, because this is really the base of the number, is 30 milliseconds when you go to MySQL, 2 milliseconds or 1 millisecond, or even less than 1 millisecond when you go to memcached. So.
So I understand correctly that you needed memcache only for the initial bang, and in other cases it was MySQL performance was enough.
That's right.
What about the client libraries? You mentioned them a little bit initially. Are you developing them? Are you making them available for someone who want to use MAPI as a client instead of being Outlook?
Well, the client library, I mean, that was my first love. And at the moment, it's right that all of our effort is focused on the server side. Now, we still do use the client library because that's a good way also to do dog fooding and to write testing tools. We also had, for example, last year we released something that was called OpenChange Sim that is actually using the MAPI library to do Outlook simulation. So that we could simulate just like 500 clients coming from different IP addresses. We do also have client, for example, tools where you can convert an exchange mailbox to an mbox file, or do this kind of thing. But I don't necessarily. I mean, there would potentially be business cases for migration tools or this kind of thing. But just like we are just like getting one thing at a time. When one thing gets done at the time, and at the moment, our focus is really to get this minimum viable product that the market would just love and after we'll see. Maybe we'll get back to that at some point. Why not? Why not? Yep. And after that, Nacho is going to tell us about the tapas tour, and that is pretty impressive.
So we have heard that it's available now, but when will you release it into the commercial version of Zentyal? And what is the user and mailbox limit of this solution compared to the current one in Zentyal 4.0 that is, as I see, the older version?
Okay, I'm going to put a commercial hat on. That's not my best one. The limit is the sky. But no, more reasonably. For a single tenant, single instance server, we do not expect. I mean, we try to put limits. The thing is that we are still trying to get out the blueprints that will tell us. I mean, that we'll be able to push to the market and say, okay, these are where we observe a significant degradation of performances. Okay. At the moment, we have several users, but and several companies that are using it. But we are always looking for more and more load. So the question with the decomposable, with the scalable architecture, the hosted exchange one, is a no-brainer because, I mean, you need more user, we fire up more nodes. And actually one of the limits we have found is in terms of number of users that we could get on one single Active Directory because of all of the exchange schema that we are loading and when we have several companies. And well, actually that's Carlos that has been working on that. And if I'm not mistaken, we start to get some degradation of performances after 4,000, it's 4,000 users? 4,000 companies, yeah. 4,000 companies with 1 or 2 users because of the architecture. So the thing that we're doing is that we are firing up as many Active Directory as we need, and we are putting, we are just like doing sharding and splitting the company on the different Active Directory servers.
So I try to define a question another way. So for a small or medium business where they have one server, mainly what's the limit for a general level server, not a high end or a low end?
Okay, no
today.
bullshit. I won't be able to give you a proper answer. What we have defined as a limit, because it's something that we feel is reasonable, is 300 users. We don't want to commit more. Maybe after with a little less number of users, we start to see some performances issue. We don't know at the moment, but the thing is that the stack, the software that you're using, should be able to get us to this limit without any problems. Best answer I can provide. Welcome. Well, if that's all, thank you very much. And I now let you, Nacho, that is going to have a much interesting talk. I mean, tapas tour. I dream about it.
Thank you.